the productivity monster in my head is like, buy the self-help book, you need it. And the rational part of me is like, we literally have 3 unread self-help books at home. We don't need it. The monster's like, we need it. And then I end up buying 3 more books. Hey, what's up? I'm Adam. If you're new here and if you're returning, then you know what's good. Today I want to talk about why I stopped reading self-help books, why I've taken a break, and it's been almost a year since I actually completed a self-help book. And if you've been on my channel for a while, you know I think very highly of books. I still read books, just not necessarily in this genre. And I've gained a lot of insight from them, but I feel there comes a point where something that was once helping you can become a hindrance or can stop you from elevating to new levels. And I'd like to break that down in this video. And maybe you found these same things when it comes to self-help books and the whole thing in general. So yeah, let's just get into it. Firstly, let's kind of define what we're talking about when we say self-help books, right? So the Collins Dictionary describes self-help as doing things yourself to try and solve your own problems without depending on other people. So that's obviously the self-help portion of it. And I think most of us here know what a book is. And so they're books that are designed to get you to try and solve your own problems. Examples of these that have been famous throughout the years, or even some that I've spoken about on this channel, include, Think and Grow Rich, Atomic Habits, The 4-Hour Work Week. I mean, there's so many books that fall into this category that have really been coming out for years. Self-help books are not a phenomenon of the last 10 years. I mean, they've been coming out for a while. So then if they've maintained and sustained for so many years, and if I've also engaged with them, and you probably have too at some point, why am I now saying that it may be a good idea to take a break from them or stop reading them? Well, here's why. So one of the reasons why I stopped reading self-help books is because I found myself chasing the high of reading the book versus actually achieving goals in real life. And this falls into the kind of broader category of those false senses of accomplishment, where you spend so much time planning and researching, and you kind of get hits of you get good feelings and rewards and feedbacks that make you feel good from that you don't always end up implementing these things in your real life and affecting change there. We cycle into this place where the productive task becomes reading the book, right? Like finding a book that you're going to read and then going to the bookshop, which I love. Bookshops are like, and reading the book and maybe posting about it, that in itself becomes the task or the thing that you're aiming to do. And the thing with this is the information stored in books, the information anywhere, if you take it on, it still remains only potential, right? It's unrealized until you do something with it. And so I've found myself getting trapped in that cycle. And whilst I usually try to take time to implement some of the steps that I would read in these books, but the sheer amount of books I was reading, there was no way I could consciously and effectively implement all those things into my life. And that's not necessarily to say you have to do everything you read in a self-help book. But if I'm really trying to pull and yield from these, then maybe it's better to read a few and test them out. Maybe just use the knowledge that I already have from the years of reading these books and start implementing some of that stuff. The next point I want to make is that there are other mediums to transfer information regarding self-help besides books. And some of these are actually more useful in certain use cases. What I mean by this is, once upon a time, books were the primary way that we passed information between people, right? How we could pass them through generations, but also through space, not just time. And they were valuable and they remain so, but we have a multitude of ways to transfer information now that sometimes I think it can be snobbery that makes us lean towards books. Like this idea like, you read. Like there's a culture with reading that maybe not as assigned to things like watching videos or listening to podcasts, although podcasts I think are kind of more towards the book side. And in that, we lose the potential to get information in different ways from different people that may actually be more relevant to you. So for example, I love watching YouTube videos. No surprise, I also make YouTube videos. And the reason is because you can get really specific in this whole idea of trying to solve your own problems, this self-help. You can gain insight and information from people that may actually be more aligned with your current situation. It may be that you watch someone who's on a similar journey to you, who's of a similar age or lives in a similar region of the world or has overcome similar obstacles, you can get really specific and niche down with that in ways that you may not be able to with a general book. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some practices and some tools and things that are universal and they will stand the test of time and space. But there's so many ways we can gather information now that why limit yourself? So the next reason I kind of take a step back from self-help books was because I wanted to invest more time in creative pursuits, right, creative activities. And this is because when you are reading books like this all the time, or even still watching information, you're consuming all the time. And if your life leans more to the consumption side versus the producing side, then there's only so far you can ever go, right? The people that we look up to in the world are often the people who have created, who have innovated, who have taken us to the next step with action. Speaking specifically to the creative side of our brain, there is so much power there that I think sometimes a very logical, practical person like me has downplayed. And whilst I've always been a creative person to some extent, I haven't lent into that as much as I should. And like I said, I think that's where a lot of the power comes. That's not to say that the building blocks and like the structure is not important, because if you're just creative but there's no structure around it, then it can be hard to realize goals and things like that. Now that can be something as simple as reading a fiction book, because that in itself I think is a creative task. Think about it. When you read a story, there is no visual element or anything like that. So if it's a story about a dystopian era or whatever it's about, something rooted not in reality, then you have to fill in the blanks. And there's an element of creation and production that happens in your mind, right? It's why often the movie never really meets your expectations of the books, I think, other than them losing a lot of the plot. Yeah. It's also because it can't compete with what you've imagined those scenes to look like. But it's also things like making content. It's things like painting, like dancing, using your body and your mind in ways that allow it to express what it feels, what it sees, is something that can't be found in a self-help book. And that's not to say that's their purpose, but I just thought that it would be more beneficial for me to start leaning more to that creative side and focusing more on that. And the final reason why I stopped reading self-help books is I was starting to find that they were kind of getting repetitive. Like I was opening up the book and I was like, this kind of sounds like something I've read somewhere else, but repackaged, just told by a different person. I just was over it. And it was why I started buying these books and never completing them. Like I have a stack on my Kindle, I have some at home that I'm not reading, and I don't really want to right now. So that repetitiveness, that kind of just almost lift and shift element of some self-help books just started to turn me off the whole thing in general. And of course there are different genres. There's ones that come into finance and stuff like that. And I am not saying these books are of no value. I'm just saying that when you weigh things up, you have to calculate, is it beneficial for me to read this book right now, if at all? And is there other things that I can do that may also be beneficial or more beneficial than this self-help book? Okay, so that's it. This was a quick one. I just wanted to come and share this with you because I think sometimes in this quest to be the most productive version of ourselves, we can take away from really important features of ourselves and actually just not be that productive at all. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment. Tell me about how you feel about self-help books. Do you find them beneficial? What are some of your favorite ones? Do you find that they sometimes hinder you? Or maybe just comment on some of the points that I've made today. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Let's have a conversation about it. I will see you in the next video.